or any declarations of interest? No. It's a good start. We move to item 3, which is the NHS redesign project update, and we have Kenny Rogers, who's going to lead us through this. Kenny, over to you.
Thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me along. So I'll just give a brief summary of where we're at currently, and then usually the best bit, get some questions, which I think is what everybody usually likes. So in terms of the hospital itself, construction's progressing well against the revised COVID-19 plan, and our scheduled handover date is 18th of August, and that's been the case for some time now. So it does appear there's some stability in that programme, which has been really helpful, particularly for closing 2 hospitals and moving into one. It's that certainty that we're looking for currently. So we'll get handover in mid-August, and we've pretty much fully developed a 6-week transition plan, where we're looking at the commissioning side of things, so phones, IT, equipment, and then moving services across from the existing hospitals to the new hospital in Arrears, which is a significant piece of work. We've never done that before, across 2 sites and into one in a different place. So we've got a project team looking at that transition plan to take that forward. We've just done a review of our workforce plan for the inpatient element of the new hospital, to review the business case, which is quite a few years old now, and there's been quite a lot of changes have taken place since, in particular in relation to the government's Safe Staffing Bill legislation. So we've reviewed our proposed establishment, and that reconciles. So we've confirmed there's appropriate staff in the plan to deliver the care. And the 2 hospital nursing teams have had lots of opportunity to work together on that workforce plan and are starting to integrate well prior to the move. It's going to be a very different working environment for the staff. It's going to be working in cohorted zones of 6 beds for each touchdown base, which is very different than the model of service for the layout that they have currently. So staff have been working on ghost models for the new hospital based on the existing patients that are in the 2 hospitals currently, and mapping out how they would look after those patients based on numbers and their acuity and any issues. So that's a sort of help to familiarise them before they move. And we've also worked with staff on a mock-up of an inpatient room that's been constructed in advance of completion, so they can familiarise themselves with that environment as well. So quite a lot of work with the workforce. On the softer side of things, we've been doing work locally with local artists supported by Angus Grant, the teacher at Grattan Grammar, and we've been working with them on colour schemes, but also an art strategy. So bringing art into the hospital to make it for people's well-being, and working closely with that just to get a sort of additionality to it, to make it feel maybe a bit more homely. New hospitals are quite often very clinical environments, and we do need to soften them a bit if we can. And we've also been ongoing work with the Badenoch and Strathspey Therapy Gardens folk to get the therapy gardens set up and running, and they'll certainly be doing work over the winter with us to take that one forward. The other aspects of the project, as everybody knows, it's not just about a new hospital, it's also about investment in community services, and with resources being freed up in the not too distant future when we close 2 hospitals, we're able now to start recruitment for the additional posts under the redesign, in particular around district nursing, community mental health team, and HP services, which are people like physio and occupational therapists. We have been doing additional work around care at home, ongoing challenges there, and we're looking to recruit to additional care at home posts, and we expect to be staffed to the level identified in that plan by October, and that plan is already starting to have an impact on hospital discharge. So we're starting to look at care at home slightly differently and how we engage with the sector and how we pull patients through the system from Raigmore into the community hospital and then into the community. And that's actually working quite well, work that's been led by Maria Dixon. And we're having discussions with the independent sector providers around the creation of a block contract that will further enhance provision, with the expectation we'll be able to support people's care at home needs across all areas of Badenoch and Strathspey. End of life care, another area of importance that people have raised, and I think I'd said before, we had a Pathfinder project in Badenoch and Strathspey for NHS Highland to improve the identification and monitoring of end-of-life care patients, working with GPs, Marie Curie, the hospice, and I think with the additional investment that's going in as a result of the redesign, particularly around the care at home capacity, the header beds at Grant House and the Wade Centre, and the flexible support workers that we're looking to enhance around the district nursing team, means we should have the improved ability to support people either to die at home or within their community, as we set out within the plan. Moving on to other aspects of the project, health centres. So members will recall that in order to retain services in their host towns in Kingussie and Grattan, we have to increase the footprint of our health centres, and also use the project as an opportunity to improve that infrastructure, which is quite elderly in places. And that work has commenced in Kingussie. The practice there is building an extension, part funded by NHS Highland under this project. And in Grattan, we're at an advanced stage of planning, and we'll start that work once we move the services out of Ian Charles, because we're going to use the Ian Charles as a decant facility for the practice whilst the work is taking place in the health centre. So we're expecting that will start commencing in the autumn and will take around 9 months to progress. We've been doing quite a bit of work, which would welcome your views on around communications in recent months. Our plan has been to use the Strathy as our preferred medium for communicating with folk. And we've had a couple of articles recently around the construction progress, and also around end of life and care at home. And we've got an article this week coming around the health centres and some of the work that's taken place there. We haven't had huge amounts of feedback. Letters page has been comparatively quiet. I think the people I've spoken to seem to think that we are communicating, but welcome members' views on that one. And finally, we're planning an open weekend that I'll run around the end of August, where we'll allow anybody really to book a slot to come and view the hospital and tour it and review it, with some open forum for questions and so on through myself over the whole weekend period, just so people can see the hospital and orientate themselves before we actually move in, when obviously it will become a building where we have patients. And so that's just a brief summary, Chair. As usual, delighted to take questions and chat through lots of things.
And Kenny, this is fabulous as far as I'm concerned. We seem to have been working on this forever. I think at one point I was seeing more of you than I was of my wife. But now we've got to the stage where we're nearly at the finishing straight, and it's fabulous to see. I think one thing that we maybe need to consider jointly, the council and NHS Highland, is what is done with the Aviemore Health Centre, because it's a very important building and could become very important to the council, bearing in mind it's right next door to the primary school. And just a simple thing, when you started talking about art, is it worthwhile having the local primary school in some way involved in designing art? There's a painting on my office wall which is from Aviemore Primary School, so I was thinking something similar.
Yep. So what we did was, there are things called manifestations, because there's lots of glass in this building, and manifestations are those sort of banners that go through the middle of glass so you don't crash into it. And what we did was we had art competitions with, it was actually the high schools rather than the primary schools, for them to design those manifestations, and they are being built into the design of the building, and they'll be printed on transfers. But certainly that's something I can take forward around the primary school side of things, Bill, as well.
Yeah, I mean, primary school is only a couple of 100 yards away from the new hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So
In respect of your comment around the health centre, I am awaiting communication from the council around that. so I'm as keen as you are to progress that. So it'd be good if somebody could perhaps make contact with me, maybe as the letterbox, and I'll make sure that it gets put through to the appropriate people in NHS Highland and see if we can get that moved forward.
Maybe Kate and Liz could take that forward for us. Muriel.
Good morning, Kenny, and thank you very much for the update. Really appreciate it. Just a couple of thank you for the prompt reply to my email last week, but it's just to share with my colleagues here. Following my attendance at the Access panel last week, they raised concerns that the Changing Places facility had been removed from the new hospital. I know Kenny's looking into it, but I just want this to be noted that it is seen to be an integral part of our health delivery, and it's really important, and I believe a very important message that we put out to the public for any new facilities we've got. So I appreciate any help that you've got with that, Kenny. The other couple of points was delighted that the safe staffing legislation that NHS Highland sort of met the standards, and we are looking to recruit. I think that's a really positive thing to come out of that. Interestingly, I think the work that has been going on for the end of life care has been fantastic, and I think the input from the hospice group has been invaluable, and that will benefit everybody across the ward. So look forward to hearing the final outcome for that. And the independent provider contractor contract that you're looking at, will that cover all aspects of care that's required? Because I understand, particularly during COVID, that there were certain clauses where the independent providers had to sort of fall back on the NHS, which put some added pressures on that. So I think it's important that you know, we tie these things down so that we know what we're getting, or our clients and our communities know what they're getting. And the final point, sorry Ken, it's a list of questions, is the radiology update. I know the GPs are still concerned about having the X-ray facility. I know Maria's been looking into it, and I'm awaiting an update. Any help that you could muster would be great. Thank you.
John.
Thank you. Just a few housekeeping questions, Kenny. This is terrific in that it's suddenly become a reality now, which is very good. The patient entertainment, are you going to have the sort of TV or radios for individuals' beds? Is there a system in hand for that?
Thanks, John. So the world's moved on a lot around patient entertainment, and everybody knows how awful the patient line system has been in the past, and the cost of entertainment. And more people really have their own tablets, is what we find in our hospitals. So it's really about access to Wi-Fi is what we're looking at these days, more than access to television and radio facilities. So there will be Wi-Fi accessibility for patients that will be separate from the NHS network, which is a secured, protected network for obvious reasons. And that's what we'll be working on. There will be TV available. However, the priority will be about securing Wi-Fi.
Right, that's excellent, because Regmore, if they could detect you had Wi-Fi on your body, they got very cross if you started using it. So obviously there's a system operational now that's separate from the hospital system.
Yeah, Regmore have sort of de-escalated their position over the last year around the use of mobile devices in hospital. There's less interference than there was with medical equipment as technology's improved. So I think it's the same in Regmore.
It's good to know. Can I just ask, what's the total number of beds that you're having there?
So constructing 24.
24, right, thanks.
Yep, we'll use 20 in the first instance. In order for us to invest in community infrastructure, and we'll have the other 4 around future proofing.
Okay, thanks.
Pippa.
Hi Kenny, it's lovely to hear you,
Hi.
if not see you. Hi. It was just a quick simple question, I hope, with regard to the dying at home care that you're putting forward, are they working in liaison with the mental health team? Because my understanding of dying at home, although it can be far more of a good death as opposed to a bad death, if you understand the difference, it can also place a huge and unusual stress on those that are remaining with the person that's leaving, which maybe, although it's not always ideal, a hospice would provide a buffer for that person. And I just wonder if we're catching up and working in tandem, that when these things become more and more standard for our communities, that they've got the support there to help them.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sure they have.
the approach to end of life should always be multidisciplinary, and certainly that's an approach we're trying to improve upon, and that's where a lot of the focus of that work has taken place. Is who do you know, what in organisations and professions do you pull in to wrap around for that individual who's at end of life? And I think an important element of that is spiritual care. That isn't something necessarily that the community mental health team will provide. They provide a much more clinical service, although they may be involved as a profession within the multidisciplinary team. And that's really where the trained professions like Marie Curie, the hospice, who run a virtual hospice service to help, and district nursing can provide much more spiritual link care, as well as the hands-on care that they provide in terms of end-of-life medications and so on. So yeah, there is a focus there, Pippa. Very welcome for your input around that as well, if you're interested.
Kenny, I think Muriel had a couple
Thank
of
you.
points. You maybe want to respond to them. Maybe not.
If I can remember off the top of my head, so I think one of them was X-ray, wasn't it? So Muriel's right. There's ongoing challenges in encouraging the Rigmore managed X-ray service to maintain services in the periphery, and COVID has not helped that. So the GPs are certainly seeking clarification and assurance from the radiography service that X-ray services will be available in Aviemore on the days required. We certainly want to have as much demand as we can there. So there's a patient-focused booking service, so patients should be able to decide where they actually receive their care. So it's really important that patients say as much as possible that they want to receive care in Aviemore. I think once X-ray see their new facility, I think they'll be quite pleased. It's probably one of the best situations in the whole hospital in terms of being bright and airy and access. So we're keen to sell it to them as well. And the practice, and as you say, Muriel Maria's working with them at the moment just to encourage them to see Aviemore as a priority place for delivery of radiography services. I think that's broadly in line with what you know already, Muriel, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't remember what the other questions were.
It
I
was
think,
the,
Kenny, given
Sorry.
the I suppose the number of visitors who visit the area, summer and winter, between mountain bikers, skiers, etc., the omission of a radiography service doesn't seem to be very sensible to the layman like me. Muriel?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, thank you, Kenny. And I think the other huge concern I've got is when you have inpatients, they tend to require chest X-rays, and the idea of sending somebody up to Rigmore for a chest X-ray is quite concerning. The other thing was the Changing Places facility, Kenny.
Yep. So the Changing Places facility, I recall discussing it certainly in the early days, and I think one of the issues we had at the time was when it was a revenue funded project rather than a capital funded project, then effectively there wasn't the financial ability to put a Changing Places facility in there, and it was also deemed at the time, and I remember having the discussions, that there were other facilities within Aviemore, so the changing facility place wasn't planned within the build. However, I understand that the accessible WC in the hospital could be made available as a changing place facility should it be required, and would meet the standards that are set out. And I believe Heather Cameron's taken that forward with the access panel to discuss currently.
That's great. Kenny, thank you very much for giving up your time today. It's really good to see the project going forward, and I think the local members have always supported this project right from the start.
They have indeed.
And we're pleased to see it coming to fruition.
Excellent.
So thank you very much. I'll let you get back to the day job.
Thank you very much. See you. Bye.
Yes. Members, item 4 in the agenda is the police area performance report, and we have Inspector Vince Tuff with us this morning. Vince.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody again. Just really, thank you for the invitation to join you today and speak against the performance report. It covers the period the 1st of April last year up until the 31st of March this year. I understand the report got shared previously, so I think you've had the opportunity to look at it. Largely going through the report, the figures are very positive, but it's fair to say that this sort of classic crime group survey, it doesn't really sit in well with the the COVID year that we've gone through, but it's kind of the format that we have, and I'll touch on some of the figures in the report just as we go through it. Looking at road safety and road crime, unfortunately over the period we did have the 2 fatal road traffic collisions. The first back on the 24th of June last year on the A9 by about Kingussie area, and then secondly on the Davamore, the A939 back on the 7th of October last year. Really quite different collisions in nature, but obviously equally tragic to all the folk involved in these accidents. Thankfully, road traffic offences and crimes, they're actually down over the period in general, but obviously that's going to be a reflection that there just hasn't been the same volume of traffic on the roads at all over that period. I think we're getting back towards more normal levels. That's when the snow's not closing the roads. And obviously I think the tourist traffic's been impacted a fair bit just by the horrendous weather. So but it's certainly picking up at the moment. In terms of going through the report, the next area to touch on is the acquisitive crime or dishonesties. Housebreakings, they're down by about 50%. That's a really good drop in terms of crimes. Obviously, more folk are at home, there's less folk travelling about, so there's been a real drop in the housebreaking offences. The recent thefts that we had from the wolf tracks, cycle route and the cycle shop and the bike shop in Granton and Spey, we've actually had a number of people arrested and charged with these offences and taken into custody. So they're going to be going through the court system for those. Involved quite a bit of work by the local CID with other policing divisions in the south of Scotland and the north of England. So, but they've all been pulled together. It involved quite a complicated pattern of crime across the country, but they've certainly been arrested and charged with these offences. So that's good. The only other thing I'd touch on there is the shoplifting figure. Sometimes it can be a bit of a marker on social pressures. It certainly used to be in city centre areas where I worked in the past, but it's actually gone down slightly, not noticeably, but it's no big sharp rise. So I think that's a positive. I would have been concerned if there'd been a real spike there, but thankfully it hasn't over that period. I would say a lot of the shoplifting we get is either young kids, the old stealing a bottle of juice, or it's people from out with our area. So that seems to be the pattern for shoplifting offences. Most of them are detected, I would say. The next area just to touch on is antisocial behaviour and violence and disorder, we would call it, the section there. The number of persons charged with drug supply cases, that's gone up. So that's great. To be honest, the more people we can get into the court system for being concerned in supply of controlled drugs, the better. I do try and get our it's not quite a drugs unit that we have, but we've got a flexible sort of crime unit. I got them into the area at the weekend. They did get one individual with drugs at the weekend, but they got tied up by a missing person as well. So, but it's just, like I say, I do try to get them in as often as possible just to work in that area. The number of breach of the peace offences, they're significantly down. Assaults are reduced by a half, and also the assaults on emergency workers, be that the paramedics or police, they're down from 10 to just 1. reality is that's just going to be the fact the licensed premises haven't been open. So certainly over the next period, I imagine we'll get a spike again in figures, but certainly it's good that there's been a drop off there. Vandalism figures, they're relatively unchanged, a slight drop. Obviously, we have had a number of calls about youth congregating in the evenings at certain locations, and some of the members will be aware of these calls, but obviously there hasn't been the same number of youth clubs open or activities. It's no excuse, absolutely, but certainly we've had to prioritise patrols in a couple of the areas across the Badenoch and Strathspey area. Sexual offences is the only other area I'll sort of touch upon. The figures there are largely unchanged. Each crime and victim is completely unique, and I would say that each incident gets reviewed by a senior detective. Obviously it's reviewed by the local CID department for there. So in general terms, I think the year has seen, just as we all know, a lot more partnership working than was ever the case before, with the elected members, the NHS, Highland Council, and also like the Cairngorm Visitor Management Group. Liz and myself go along to that occasionally as well. My own view is that a lot of this partnership work, well, the vast majority of partnership working has been really good. It's been really, I mean, I think people's attitude and the commitment levels, it's been very pragmatic. And obviously I've only been in the area for a certain while now, but I think it's a case that it's been good for a lot of years, if not decades. And I think it's really sort of served the community well, getting through this initial COVID period. So I would certainly say that there's a lot of people that you know, have really sort of been stepping up to the plate over the past year. So it's certainly made life a lot easier across the different emergency services, I would say. So that's it really. Just perhaps there might be any questions at all.
I think one of the big things is, Vince, that come the next report this time next year, we shouldn't be beating ourselves up over it, because the previous year, 2020, has been something extraordinary. Pubs shut, shops shut for long periods of time, etc., etc. So let's not go overboard next year. I think we need to bear that in mind. And obviously, the council has suffered some very serious vandalism, toilets, etc., being wrecked at great expense. And I appreciate what you say about the youth, because there is no doubt about it, and especially in the remote rural areas, especially when bus services had been cut back, etc., there was nowhere for these kids to go and nothing for them to do. It doesn't, I suppose, excuse vandalism, but certainly if we make the effort, and maybe we can give them something else to do rather than rip toilets apart. Muriel.
Thank you, Inspector, for the report. It's really helpful. Just a couple of points. I know I'd like to thank all the team for coping in the strangest of times in the part year, particularly when we're even dealing with people breaching the COVID transport and coming to the area. I think you have handled it amazingly well and very diplomatically. One thing I was wondering, are you able to sort of plan some resources now for working? Your community police team, I think, do a great job, but in light of some of the challenges that we've had, working with our young people in the communities and with the partners involved, I think some of the work you've done has been great, but I would love to see it enhanced where possible. And the other concern I've got is I don't know whether there's a real increase, but certainly I'm being contacted more frequently with drug issues and people selling, whether it's whatever class of drug it is, it doesn't matter. There's a public anxiety out there in certain areas. And again, I know you're resource dependent, but I think we need to maybe be looking at that locally. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's two very topical issues that you've raised there, really, in terms of work and trying to sort of improve the partnership working to do with, trying to help the young people in our communities, because undoubtedly when you speak to them, they're really quite nice. They're not, they're actually very pleasant, and it's and it kind of makes you want to help them more, because it's they're not throwing rocks at your police car, which I've had in the past. They're actually quite nice to speak to. So I would say the head teacher in Grant and Spey, obviously, she's been very helpful. We've had a lot of good work there with the school. So and we did have instances of fireworks being thrown in the community. And the nature of Granton, these fireworks sound horrendous. When you put it in the square, they sound horrendous, and they weren't your standard fireworks as well. And there's some areas of damage as well. So, but the school were really helpful in terms of, because we decided to just go straight to the source, and we basically went round and did the house visits and made sure that the parents knew exactly what the kids were involved in. So, a number of kids were charged where it was appropriate, but we just made sure that we tried to pull the evidence together as quickly as possible and get into the children's homes and just speak to the parents about what was happening. And, a number of the parents did ground the children. We were able to find out, who was responsible for quite a lot of it. And, most of it, folk have now been charged. So I've appointed a new liaison officer to work in the school at Granton. And he's actually the officer that arranged for that additional resource at the weekend to come into Granton and Spey. So he's, he knows the ones that are causing the issue, and he's arranging these additional operations. And the school have asked for more visits, and again, this officer, he's involved in those visits. So that's been really useful, I think, for that particular area. In terms of the drug offences, yeah, certainly it's something that we try to focus on as much as possible. And yeah, I would say that on an ongoing basis, I've got meetings with our local CID, and we're just trying to prioritise key target individuals to look at addressing the issue, which I think is on the rise across the area. I mean, sometimes you're even getting sweets now that are laced with drugs. It's, we had a local person dealt with in our Badenoch and Strathspey area. So you're taking sweets off people that have got drugs in them. So it's yeah, I think the more we can do, the better, really, in terms of sort of tackling that issue.
I think, Vince, I can speak for all the members in saying that the communication that we get normally is really good. But strangely enough, I have to be honest, the less we hear from you, the better, probably. Because normally we only hear from you when it's something really important. But certainly the communication is really appreciated. And thank you very much. None of the other members have got any questions. So again, by all means, stick around if you've got insomnia, but I'm sure you've got better things to do.
That's great. I'll go before it gets too tricky. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. Cheers. Members, item 5 is the housing performance report, and I believe we could have Sandra McLennan or David Wood here.
Thank you, Chair. It's David today.
Okay, David.
I intend to leave my camera off if that's okay, because for
that's
some
right,
strange reason, it actually assists with my internet connection.
That's not a problem. Just carry on.
Lovely, thank you. Morning, everyone. Well, I'd like to present the housing performance report for Q4. That covers the period January to March 2021. And I'll bring your attention to effectively the salient points of the report. So we start with emergency repairs. I'll start with an apology on this, because the report you have doesn't actually show the average Highland time, which was unavailable to us at the time that the report was compiled. However, since then we've obtained it, and it's 8.5 hours is the average Highland time. In Badenoch and Strathspey, there's been a slight increase in the time taken to complete emergency repairs. It's out to 10 hours. This is basically due to COVID-19 and the additional safety measures that were put in place to ensure the safety of contractors That said, our 10-hour target is still within the 14-hour limit we look for. If we move on to non-emergency repairs, the figures actually show a slight improvement in the time taken to complete non-emergency repairs compared with previous quarters. The figure stands at 5 days, which is within the target time of 8 days. As you know, the focus during this period and this time has been on emergency repairs, and this has created something of a backlog in the non-emergency repairs, and the teams are actually working their way through them as best they can. That may impact on future figures. The repairs are only reported when they're completed, so they may start some non-emergency repairs, but if they don't complete them, it won't reflect on the report. So it could be that by the time the next committee report comes out, the figures may not show as going down. It may kind of impact on the way they're reported, if that makes any sense. Moving on to the relets. Relet times are slightly over the 35-day target, standing at 39.17. But again, there's a slight improvement on previous quarters. Again, it's like a broken record. We can attribute this to the increased safety measures put in place because of the COVID-19 outbreak. That said, again, we're still below the Highland average. If we look at rent arrears, slight increase on the previous quarter. I think it's important to point out with rent arrears, the officers are continued to focus on the rent arrears, and they're quite proactive in contacting tenants, and they continue to offer appropriate advice and help and signpost to other agencies that can assist them as well. We know a lot of people have struggled during this period. So what we've tried to do is adopt a sympathetic approach. So we've not been overly heavy-handed when trying to kind of pull the rent arrears together. I think, again, it's appropriate to point out from the 26th of April, doorstep visits commenced, which meant the officers could go knock on the door but not enter the property. So there was that face-to-face interaction with our tenants again. As from the 17th of May, they could enter the properties, and the hope is that now we're face-to-face with the tenants again. That will show an impact on the figures going forward. Looking at homelessness, 21 presentations over the period. That's pretty much back to normal volume. If we look at the same period last year, I think we had 20 presentations, so things have leveled out. What makes it look high is the previous 2 quarters have been extremely low, 6 and 7 presentations respectively. During those quarters, quite stringent measures were in place, no evictions were taking place. So what our officers had concentrated on was to offer homeless prevention advice and again signposting to appropriate agencies who could help. Capital programme. I think the Housing Investment Officers recently provided quite a specific update to the ward business meeting. So I think that covers that. And if we look finally at Appendix 1, there are no red indicators, just one amber indicator. The amber indicator relates to the percentage of new tenancies sustained for more than a year. That was actually one tenant who did a mutual exchange with the existing tenant from outside the area, decided Highland wasn't for them, and they subsequently gave the tenancy up and moved out of the area again. So again, everything else other than that's green. So I think that's quite a good performance really. But I'm happy to take any questions that anyone's got.
Members, I think we need to bear in mind that many of these figures are affected by COVID. So we need to take them all with a wee pinch of salt. I think from my point of view, I'm always concerned basically about rent arrears, because to my mind at least, the great majority of people don't pay their rent when they can't pay their rent. So it's poverty that causes rent arrears, and that's concerning. However, if you compare it with last year, it has plateaued, and I would have expected it to get much, much worse this year, and clearly it hasn't. So that I think is a good thing. Pippa.
Hi, David. It was a question. I hope it's an appropriate place for such a question with regard to our homeless provision. I can see that we've had an upsurge in the homeless presentations after a decrease, which is understandable, but it was to do with on a local level where we're taking them. I understand that we were having to rejig our homeless provision because of updated guidelines from the Scottish Government. So I know that we were looking to have that all turned around and turned into something different. And we were looking to identify housing around the area to give it a more spread out view. Can I ask where we're at with that? Or is that yet another thing that COVID has impacted? And we're not looking at seeing any changes in that this year, but maybe next? If it's not the place for the question, I accept that and I'll with redacted.
Muriel.
Thank you, David. Thanks for the report. Just a couple of things. I don't know whether it's anecdotal, but I would welcome the feedback. Is there an increase in demand and people going on the housing waiting list? I know I've dealt with a few cases that they have been in accommodation for quite a period of time, and the landowner or whoever it is has given them notice because the accommodation is going to be turned into holiday accommodation. And, you know, have we seen an increase in people on our waiting list? The other thing is I'm delighted that you're going back to the face-to-face. I know there's a few people really needing to see the team. And wondered if you've noticed any increase in antisocial behaviour with some tenants, and how has that increased because there's been, as a council provider, have been unable to do any face-to-face.
That's your lot, Kenny. I'm afraid no one else has indicated, so maybe try and answer some of those questions. David, sorry. I think we maybe have lost David.
Sorry, Bill, is that better?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, apologies for that. Told you, not a great internet connection, I'm afraid. Yeah, going back to Pippa's question about homeless provision, I think you're referring to the government's unacceptable accommodation order that came into force. So, for example, Badenoch House in Kingussie, where we had 5 rooms with shared facilities available to us, we can no longer use that. So we needed to close that down, and that's gone to the development and infrastructure team, and that will be developed into 5 self-contained flats, which we think will probably be available to us at some time next year. But that's the plan for that. But to counter the loss of that, what we've needed to do is go to our own stock and remove properties we would ordinarily have allocated on a permanent basis and turn them into temporary units and furnish them. Now, clearly, it's something of a balancing act. We can't just go and say we've lost 5 rooms there. Let's take 5 properties out of our stock, because clearly no one moves on then. So we've tried to do it appropriately, and we've tried to pinpoint properties that become available to us, so that we've moved them across the region as well. So we've not put them all in Granton or all in Aviemore or all in Kingussie. We've tried to spread them out so we can meet people's demands better. But that's going fine, and the fact that we're using our own stock actually gives us the flexibility to do that. And there's also the potential that if people are placed in a temporary unit that we own like that, if they've been there a while and we find they like it, we can negotiate with them. And if they wish to remain there, we've got the opportunity to turn that into a secure tenancy. But obviously we would only do that with their agreements as well. So it does offer us that flexibility, which is really, really good. Going on to Muriel's questions, there's been no real increase in the waiting list demand, Muriel. Now, I don't know whether that is because of COVID and the fact that landlords were able to give notice to people, but they were extended periods of notice for specific reasons. So we were talking 3 months or 6 months as opposed to the 28 days in some case. So there's not been an excessive increase in demand on the waiting list. The figures always slightly move up, but overall I would say no, there's not been a massive increase in that demand. To look at the antisocial behaviour, there's been isolated incidents of antisocial behaviour, and it's normally been created by the fact that people are living in proximity to each other. Everyone's at home. They're at home, they're playing the radio, they've got the TV on, and I think it's just the tensions that it's created. We've by and large been able to manage that out okay. There's a couple of incidents that are ongoing which we will maybe need to get a bit further under the skin of it, but generally speaking, we've been able to handle it okay.
John.
Thank you. You talk about surplus housing stock. How many properties do you have there's a surplus?
No, sorry, John. If I used the word surplus, that was an error. I didn't mean to. We've not got surplus stock.
Right.
Let me kind of be very, very clear on that to start with. What we've needed to do, because the government introduced the unsuitable accommodation order, which effectively said people cannot share facilities. They need their own property with their own front door, effectively. What we've had to do is close the likes of Badenoch House, which was shared facilities. But to fill the gap on that, we've needed to remove properties from our own stock. Now that isn't surplus stock. It's just been the local team needing to juggle what available stock we have, because clearly there is a demand for temporary units from people coming through the homeless route. So we've tried to do that in a targeted way that has not moved people on. But
okay.
Certainly we don't have surplus stock. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's good. David, thanks very much. A good report for us today, and thanks for taking the time to come and present it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Aaron.
Welcome. Members, item 6 is the education report, and we have, I believe, Fiona Shearer. Fiona.
Good morning, members. Thank you for having me along today. It's lovely to see you all. So the report today that I have submitted, apologies, it's just disappeared off my screen. I tried to give a general update around the schools return, given that we've had a disrupted year. Schools were obviously off January to Easter and then came back full time from sort of 19th of April. So it was to give you a sort of general feel for how that's been progressing. There's been lots of focus on reconnection, socialisation, and health and well-being, getting children back into the way of being at school again, getting back into the routines and so on. Obviously in our secondary schools, the focus has been on SQA, and you'll see in the report that I put in some information that we've had and shared with parents as well around SQA updates. Donald Patterson continues to link in with all of the SQA coordinators in the schools regularly. and we have a team of 3 additional staff who are supporting that process as well. This has been a challenging time for schools and for young people. Schools are trying to support them through this process as best as they can, and there's lots of changes coming from SQ8 quite often. So it's a case of keeping on top of those updates and speaking to schools and putting those actions into place as and when things change. My understanding is we're still waiting for information from SQA around the appeals process, and as soon as we have that, we'll be working with the schools, Canusie and Grantown as well, to see how that's going to work out in each of their settings, because it is different in each of the schools. In the primary schools, generally things are going very well. There was a bit of an adjustment period for staff and for children, which is understandable given such a long break. So as I say, that focus was about reconnection, socialisation, and just getting back into the routines and being back in school again. The feedback overall from the head teachers in the area is that it was lovely to see the children reconnecting with one another and with their teachers. You know, they had missed each other, they had missed that face-to-face connection, even though they were well supported remotely while schools weren't open to them. It's been really lovely to hear the positive feedback, particularly in the primary schools. The outward bound sessions that we've been putting into schools are to support transition. Clearly last year transition was affected and impacted by COVID as well. So this is to support our current P7s going into S1, but it's also supporting our S1s as well. And the outward bound sessions has had great feedback. Canusie Primary reported that the children and the staff really benefited from those sessions, and it's something that we're looking to see if we can make more sustainable and continue. That also links into the Summer of Hope programme, which was discussed at Education Committee last week. Miriam MacDonald has been leading on this. She's working with Highland, Eden Court, all our third sector partners, CALA, lots of different organisations are involved, and we're trying to ensure that there's something over the summer break in each of the areas for all of our children and young people. She's been linking in with schools around this. She's been linking in with young people themselves. Some of their aspirations were quite high, but we're trying to put on events that they are saying that they're interested in, they would want to engage in. And we're also working with colleagues in health and social care to ensure that we're targeting our most vulnerable families, because that's one of the criteria from Scottish Government in terms of the funding. But we're calling it our Summer of Hope, and it's a really exciting time, and we'll have further details on what's available in the area for you as that progresses. The COVID situation continues, as you'll be aware. The lateral flow testing is now rolled out to all young people in S1 to S6. This is absolutely on a voluntary basis, and that needs to be stressed. There's no exclusion for anyone, staff or young person, who doesn't wish to take part, but we're encouraging that, and that seems to be helping. It does mean that sometimes we will receive a positive lateral flow test result. We still absolutely go on the advice from the health protection teams, and as a precaution, they will identify close contacts and advise them to self-isolate until such times that we have confirmation from a PCR test. And then depending on the result of that, they'll either reverse the decision and write to parents, or that obviously the self-isolation would continue. That has been impacting in some of our schools for our senior pupils, but so far that hasn't been an issue in Canusie or Grantown Grammar in terms of the senior pupils and their assessments. But if that is the case, then the schools have plans in place to support the assessments on the pupils' return, and they can also continue to support them remotely. I'm happy to take any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Fiona, many pupils, parents and even staff members are concerned that the SQA assessments are nothing other than exams under a different name. How are we ensuring that our pupils are not being disadvantaged by this process? You're on mute.
Sorry, don't know how to hand. The schools have got plans in place. They are individual plans for each school because the context is different. So the schools were able to have different processes in place around the timing of their assessment windows and so on. I mean, I've got a daughter myself, and I've heard her refer to, "Oh, my friends are doing their exams." You know, it's important that we share that language with them. It's not an exam by another name. They are assessments. We are moderating across the schools. The class teachers are moderating with the managers, with the heads of department, with the senior management. We're moderating across other schools. Schools have been linked up to other schools within Highland for moderation processes, and also we're looking out with Highland as well to ensure consistency, particularly across the Northern Alliance School. So and as I say, Donald is working with a team now that are 3, I think, well, they're all senior managers. I think they're deputy heads who have been seconded to support this process and to link in really closely with the principal teachers in each department in the schools to ensure that there is that consistency. I think a lot of it is about reassuring the young people themselves. It's trying to relieve that pressure. Schools are trying to put in place, you know, other activities, other sessions for them. Some of them have now finished their assessment window. Others are still continuing. They're looking to support as much time as possible for children to prepare for these assessments so that they have the absolute best opportunity that they can in this situation we're in this year. It has been really difficult for all of them. We've also been linking in, Donald did a presentation to the Highland Parent Council Partnership so that we're speaking to parents as well about the process. It is an ever-changing process. There's lots of information and guidance coming out from SQA on a regular basis. So it's about keeping on top of that and sharing that with the schools so that we're putting in the best opportunity we can for them. But I do appreciate it's really challenging for everybody involved.
Okay, thanks. Miriam.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Fiona. Just a couple of questions. Do we know how many of our 6th-year pupils are asking to repeat a year? Because this has been a pattern across Scotland in many authorities, and you know, ensuring that there is no stigma attached to that and there's support there. I think it's important to realise the stresses and strains on that, and I think it's useful to know. The other thing, the Summer of Hope and the transition, I'm delighted that's got the support, and I think it's important as members we're up to speed on what's happening locally. I know we've had the big Highland Council launch, but I think this, you know, we've got a Summer of Hope for Badenoch and Strathspey. I think that's really important. The other thing, you know, we know that we're moving towards the 1140 in August delivery. Has that led to an increase in staffing levels and, you know, different staffing model mixes and all the rest of it? It'd be quite useful to, again, to get that message out there, you know, where we are, you know, do we need more staff? Because it's possibly over a year ago, about 18 months ago, at that time, the early years learning manager said that was their big concern, was staffing recruitment. Where are we now? Because we're near the end of this term and we're delivering 1140 in August, and I think it's important that we get a feel for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the numbers requesting to repeat S6, I don't have that to hand. I'm not aware of any that have come to me off the top of my head, but I can get that information for you. The Summer of Hope, yes, absolutely. The local plans, as I say, Miriam's working her way through this with everybody. It's quite a big task, as you can imagine. But what she's hoping to do is to be able to map it out so that there'll be information local to each area. So there'll be information about what's on in Canusi area, in the Grantown area, and that'll be obviously publicised as well through the schools for children and families to be aware of too. So there will be a mapping out of everything that's on in each of the areas for you, and we'll share that with you. In terms of 1140, all of our settings in the Badenoch Strathspey area will achieve 1140 from August. You're absolutely right about staffing, and my early years officer is working on that at the moment as we speak, in terms of looking at the numbers in each setting, what staff levels are required, and the recruitment process is underway.
Okay. Fiona, oh, sorry, Pippa.
Sorry, I just fired in.
Hi, Fiona. It was just a really quick question. You mentioned that loads of the kids have integrated really well, and it's been really positive seeing them back in their social situation, and I can absolutely understand that because I've seen them buddying up and walking back from school and seeming really happy. Have we got eyes on any that haven't been, that have had difficulty reintegrating, and do we have a satisfactory sort of outcome in dealing with them and some multidisciplinary support if that's necessary? Are we managing?
Yes, and you're right, it hasn't been an easy transition for all young people. I'm just trying to see if I put anything in the report about that. Yes, in terms of support, I mean, the schools are linking in. Our guidance teams have been quite busy supporting these young people in school. So they have support there, they've got their head of year, but we've also linked in with health and social care colleagues, so children's service workers, our practice leads. And part of that is around, it links into the Summer of Hope as well, about targeting the young people that we know have maybe struggled coming back. So it's trying to have that bigger picture so that the support is there for them. There's still something for them to engage with in the summer. Our practice leads and our children's service workers generally run events over the holiday periods anyway, and that's still going to be in place, as well as any activities from the Summer of Hope. And they know which children that they need to work with, or young people that they need to work with, just to give them that wee bit extra, because it is, and actually some of our young people they've reported that they found that the home learning suited them better in some circumstances, the remote learning suited them better. So it's about trying to have that blended approach, but it's something that we're going to look at across the piece as to how we deliver education going forward. But in terms of immediate support, yes, that has absolutely been in place. Our guidance teams have done an amazing job, along with our children's support workers, primary mental health workers, and all of that multidisciplinary team. So wherever there's a concern raised, or somebody has spoken or raised a concern to the guidance teacher, that is followed up in the schools to support them. And we're just about there now, I think. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Do you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come back in. Fiona, I'm delighted that we have got a recruitment process underway. That's great. Do we have a feel for the numbers that we're recruiting, and who's our contact person for dealing with that as elected members?
You can contact me about that and I can get you the data. Lorraine Knight is our early years officer in the South team, but she also links in with workforce planning.
Great.
In line with this just now, as well as recruiting for ELC, it's that time of year where we're working through our staffing allocations for the classes as well in each of the schools. So we'll be recruiting there. We obviously have to wait to see about our probationer numbers, whether there's any staff who need to be deployed or moved, depending on the school roles. So that whole exercise is underway now. And we've got a couple of promoted posts in the area that that the advert should be out shortly.
The other final point, thanks for your forbearance, Chair, here. There was a government scheme for the STEM training programme, fully funded for some early years, some nursery nurses and people like that. Did we have any uptake in our ward? Did we have anybody? Because I'm always keen that we promote our good news stories, and I don't know if we had any that participated in that excellent programme, because STEM is hugely important.
Yep, absolutely agree. I don't know that answer at the moment, but I will find out for you and get back to you, Muriel. No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. And those couple of questions that Muriel's left about the numbers and etc. Maybe you could circulate them to all four members.
I will do. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Thanks very much for your time. It's been good today. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Take care. Bye bye.
Members, now we move to item 7, and as you know, the headline act always comes last, and our own personal rock star today is Richard Porteous. So, Richard.
Thanks very much, Chair. Members, Board Manager, what an introduction. I hope I can follow that one. Thank you. It's been very interesting listening to the other reports. This report is brings the Area Roads Programme to committee for 2021-22. It sets out a list of prioritised structural works for the Badenoch and Strathspey area, and members are asked to approve that. It is capital funding. Our allocation this year is significantly larger than last year, which is very welcome by all in the roads team. We're very grateful for that. The revenue budget is the same, which covers cyclical works as explained in the report, but this focus is on the capital budget allocation, as I say, which is doubled from last year effectively. And it the report that went to Highland Council, excuse me, sorry, the Economy and Infrastructure Committee on the 4th of February detailed how the additional money that was given to roads, additional capital money given to roads was broken down in the table in that report. It's very clear that the extra 20 million would be split over 2 years, and so this is the first year, and the 10 million for this year is broken down into an area allocation and a strategic allocation and a £100,000 per ward. So the strategic allocation is dealt with separately. That actually went to committee, their E&I committee, on the 5th of May. This report of mine here refers to the area structural allocation and that 100,000 per ward allocation. So for the sake of this report, the two have been added together to provide a total figure of 765,000, which is in 4.3 of the report. And the appendix to this report details how the safety and engineering priorities have been listed, and that's how we would propose to spend that allocation. So if members have had time to have a look at that, it's maybe just therefore an opportunity to invite questions, and I can answer those and talk on anything else you wish me to answer. Thanks.
Well, Richard, clearly this roads programme is not limited to putting tar on roads. It's also about white lining gullies, bridges, ditches, and after years of underinvestment, we're eventually seeing some progress with an increased capital programme, and that's got to be welcome. But it's not going to get us to where we want to be. It's going to require future investment in years to come. So I think future councils need to bear this in mind, because by the time we get to next May, it will be a new council. So this is really important for us. I think everybody in the council is energised about the state of our roads, and I think fortunately here in Badenoch and Strathspey, we do better than some. But and one area I'd really like to highlight, and it's not necessarily anything to do with your department, but we have substantial areas of on-street parking in Badenoch and Strathspey, particularly places like Glenmore, that we should be charging for. And those charges could be used to provide extra off-street car parking. That's what's legally allowed. So I think it's high time that we had a report, probably first to a ward business meeting, about how we're going to provide this, because we've been asking for it for many years now, and nothing appears to be happening. So I appreciate, Richard, it's not necessarily for you, but maybe you can pass on the hint.
Thank you, Chairman. I definitely will do that. So I will do that. Yeah, it's been a very hard winter this year, which taken its toll on the road, on the roads. It's actually, the frequency of morning actions was about 10% down on the average, but we had a very sustained period of cold weather and drifting, obviously between December and the end of February, and that had a huge impact. The number of evening pre-grits was actually up 10%, which kind of underlines the sort of the ice, the prolonged ice conditions that we had, which again, the freeze-thaw action has a huge impact on the road surface and bringing out potholes, etc. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Thank you. In terms of future spending, a boom and bust scenario is really difficult for anybody to plan in. This year we've got extra money. We've had to put in a huge amount of work in advance in the background to try and ensure that we have availability of contractors this summer to spend the additional money that we've got. Thankfully, there seems to be a bit of a lull in trunk road spending, which has given us a window of opportunity, and hopefully we'll be able to maximise that following this committee. Like I say, we have a lot of plans in place in the background once we get the green light. And in terms of a road recovery momentum and energy, again, thank you for that. We really appreciate that. And we've already supplied a few photographs for online publicity following the catch-up works from last year at Myrtlefield, where we recently resurfaced in Aviemore, for example. So we'll be taking a lot of photographs this summer, and hopefully that'll help maintain that energy. Thank you.
Muriel.
Thank you, Richard, for the report. Can I just fully support the chair here on the missed revenue opportunity? I think it's something that we would welcome, because we, you know, your terminology is correct. The boom and bust is we can't cope. We need to have some really decent planning. Delighted that you know, everything is covered, because we know about the white lining and all these issues and things like that. Have we, or do we need to put some extra emergency resource into the drainage and our gully clearing? I'm just bearing in mind, we seem to, I use the terminology, a monsoon, but it seems to have been raining since last November, if it's not been snowing or frosty. And we, you know, I've had 3 emails yesterday about our usual hotspots in various parts, and wondered if that's something we need to put in future planning.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, I totally agree with you. We are in a slightly better position now. I think for the last 18 months, we have a gully sucker dedicated to our whole South Highland area, if you like. So we now share one between Lochaber and near Badenoch and Strathspey, where we used to share one between that area plus Inverness. So we've got more resource in terms of gully emptying than we've had previously, which is a tremendous boost. That's helped greatly. But yeah, you're right. There's quite a few perennial issues still around, based on you know, the Highland drainage system that we have is often it's evolved over the years rather than being designed, and so we have gullies going into soakaways which are now a bit tired, that type of thing, and will require investment in order to get improvement there. That we can maintain them, which we do, but there's a limit to what improvement you can get to the situation. You can keep it clean, but even in a deluge situation, they won't cope, just because the infrastructure is not really designed for it. Pipes are too small to allow water to get away quick enough, and it does drain away, but sometimes not quick enough. So there's legacy issues all around the Highland and this area, which we would like to resolve if we had the money, and we have allocated some in line 13 there in Appendix 1, various drainage resolutions. There's a couple in Granton-on-Spey in particular, but that's obviously not the only that are top of the list at the moment. But that's not the only village with these issues, as we know. And we've been addressing one in Dalwhinnie recently, which was an overgrown French drain, and there was one also in Newton Moor, which was kind of fell between 2 stools. It was in the back of a housing development, and we were working with partners in other housing, and in particular, we're working together with them to try and resolve that one. So sometimes it's a question of working smart rather than just pouring money at it. But so we try to be as efficient as we can with these things. But they are quite emotive. If it's near somebody's driveway or flowing into their garden, then they like to see some action. So we do try to respond as best we can.
Thank you.
Okay, no one else is asking any questions. Richard, thanks very much. It's good to hear from you again, and you're always welcome at our World Business meetings anytime you've got time. So
thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chairman, members.
Members, the last item on the agenda is item 8. The minutes are just for noting because they're already been approved by the council. So that's the last item. And maybe with a bit of luck, this will be our last ever remote meeting. So hopefully after the summer, we can actually meet face to face for a change. And that certainly would be an improvement. Although maybe officers coming from far away will still VCN because officers have got more to do than turn up just at committee meetings. So thank you all for attending and see you all soon. Bye.